United States Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas joins us. Good morning, Senator. Welcome back.
Good morning, Hugh. It's good to be back on with you.
I got some serious stuff to talk about with you, but first, two football questions. When Joe Flacco leads the Browns to the Super Bowl, do you think he'll go into the Hall of Fame as a Browns or as a Raven?
I'll leave that to all you AFC North fans, but give it to the Browns. They're playing a great season.
All right, second question. I hope you're taking your SEC gear off before you go see Marco Rubio or Rick Scott, because they're pretty unhappy right now with the College Football Playoff Committee.
Well, I have not had a chance to speak with Senator Scott or Senator Rubio since their disappointment that Florida State didn't make the 14 playoff. I'll just put it this way. It's probably good for everyone involved that we're going to have a 12-team playoff next year.
Amen. Now let's go to Kamala Harris. This is not serious, but it's important. She laid out the post-conflict conditions on Israel. She presumed to do this yesterday. I'm going to play it once, and then we're going to go back through each of the four and get your comment. Here is the Vice President, cut number 7.
5 principles guide our approach for post-conflict Gaza. No forcible displacement, no reoccupation, no siege or blockade, no reduction in territory, and no use of Gaza as a platform for terrorism.
Okay,
we want to see a unified
Gaza. Your general
Gaza.
reaction before we go them one at a time. It appears to me that she's reading something, Senator.
Yeah, well, my general reaction, Hugh, is that no one, truly no one, around the world, in the Middle East, in America, thought, what do we need to help solve Israel and America's challenges in the Middle East? And the answer was more Kamala Harris.
I know. Do you know, the only thing that was worse was John Kerry at COP, and the Arab Gulf state representative pulled out his cell phone when he was droning on. That was pretty good. But let's go through. The first one is, let's play number 1. Play it again, please. The 5 conditions.
5 principles guide our approach for post-conflict Gaza. No forcible displacement, no reoccupation.
Stop right there. No forcible displacement. Anyone talking about that, Senator Cotton, that you've seen?
No, Hugh, and what I would say in general to all 5 of those statements is that, again, Kamala Harris isn't exactly Henry Kissinger when it comes to Middle Eastern politics. And I have not heard anyone in Israel or anyone who supports Israel and America talking about forcible relocation, perhaps temporary relocation to try to protect the civilians that Hamas wants to keep in harm's way and using human shields. But I think Kamala Harris is arguing against a straw man in a patronizing way.
I agree. In fact, I don't think any military in the history of armed conflict has gone to such a great extent as to put out a grid of Gaza, which is about the size of the Beltway. And they're basically telling people, if you're in Chevy Chase, you can go to Silver Spring, or you can go down to the mall, or you can zip over to Arlington, but you can't stay in Chevy Chase. And they're doing that by a grid. Have you ever seen any military do this before, Senator Cotton?
Well, no, Hugh, it's very common for the Israeli Defense Forces to go far above and beyond the requirements of the laws of armed conflict because they know that all of the anti-Zionist and, frankly, anti-Semites around the world hold them to a unfair and unreasonable standard, and that very much includes Joe Biden and many Democrats in Washington holding Israel to an unfair standard. Unfortunately, when you put out that kind of grid and say, here's where you should go if you want to avoid our attacks, Hamas fighters and leaders get that information as well, not just widows and orphans and nursing mothers and children. And I can also tell you this, among the militaries that didn't do it, Hugh, we didn't do it in Tokyo in March 9th and 10th when we killed over 100,000 Japanese in one night. And those are not the nuclear attacks, Hugh. Those are conventional bombings.
Curtis LeMay knew what he was doing. Curtis LeMay intended to bring Imperial Japan to its knees, and it took two atomic bombs to do that. Let's go to condition number 2.
No reoccupation.
Stop. Actually, Israel doesn't want Gaza, but they are going to take back, I believe, 2 kilometers of Gaza and declare it a demilitarized zone that no one may be in. And I think we should support that, Senator. What do you think?
I think the last thing Israel wants to do, from Benjamin Netanyahu down to ordinary, normal Israeli citizens, is to have to reoccupy Gaza and be responsible, say, for public services or security there. That's why Israel left almost 20 years ago after which the people of Gaza promptly elected Hamas to lead them. But again, this is the kind of patronizing lectures that Israel doesn't need when it's facing an existential crisis from Kamala Harris, when no one in Israel wants to reoccupy Gaza.
All right, number 3 gets a little bit dicey. Go ahead with number 3.
No siege or blockade.
Stop. There is a blockade. There will be a blockade until and unless Gaza becomes demilitarized and reformed. Israel is going to maintain a blockade. So that's a departure from American policy. We did not criticize the blockade prior to 10/7, did we, Senator?
No, Hugh. And I think when the administration, the Biden administration, started complaining almost immediately after the October 7th attack that Israel was no longer providing water and electricity to Gaza, I think most normal Americans' reaction wasn't like, oh, my goodness, Israel cut off water and electricity to Gaza. It was, wow, why would Israel provide water and electricity to Gaza in the first place? Look, Gaza could do things like provide for its own public services if Hamas hadn't spent 20 years diverting billions of dollars in international aid to tunnels and to rockets, as opposed to water plants and electricity plants. But no, of course you cannot have goods flowing freely into Gaza when Hamas has demonstrated, and many Gazans have demonstrated, that they will simply use all those goods for purposes of attacking Israel, or they'll smuggle in weapons. So there has to be some element of control over the things that pass into Gaza, and that's not just something that Israel demands, it's also something that Egypt demands.
Let's play the last 2, and then we'll comment on the seawater attempt that's going to be flooding into the reverse the upside-down Maginot Line is what I call it, but let's finish with the Vice President.
No reduction in territory and no use of Gaza as a platform for terrorism.
All right, so we agree on the last one, and to do that end, it is reported by the Wall Street Journal and the Times of Israel this morning that the IDF is preparing to flood this upside-down Maginot Line. I believe that is an appropriate tactic of the war, Senator. I believe we will see the pro-Hamas media immediately say that's a war crime. What do you think?
No, of course it's not a war crime. Tunnel warfare is very complicated. It's very challenging. Your last preferred option is to send actual infantrymen into the tunnels. There are other options you can use, such as sending in dogs or sending in robots, that sort of thing. But flooding tunnels is absolutely a valid tactic for tunnel warfare. It has certain ancillary benefits as well, like shorting out the electrical systems and the life support systems like HVAC and ventilation and so forth. I'll leave it in the hands of the Israeli defense.
Did we lose you there, Senator? Oh, you're back. Okay.
I would leave it in the hands of the Israeli Defense Forces, of course, and their political leadership about which tactic is best suited for Hamas's tunnels. But one thing that we should all agree upon is that those tunnels have to be totally destroyed, and flooding them is absolutely a valid tactic, and it may be the one that Israel chooses to use.
Now, Senator, I want to switch because while this very serious conversation is going on, even though there are unserious people like the Vice President talking about it, that it is a major war. It is an important issue, and we have Xi and Putin and Khamenei, and we have all the other problems. There's been an explosion, not of the House in Arlington, but of of hysteria about Donald Trump. Robert Kagan, a Trump dictatorship is increasing inevitable. Ishan Tharoor in the Washington Post, the fear of a looming Trump dictatorship. He assures us this is not mere hyperbole. The entire issue of The Atlantic is devoted to Donald Trump, dictator on the horizon. And then we have the New York Times yesterday, why a second Trump presidency may be more radical than his first. Now, I'm in Switzerland. I don't know who's going to be the nominee, but if it's Donald Trump, I'll support him and vote for him. And I think it's absurd and stupid hysteria. What is going on here, and how do you characterize it?
Well, Hugh, many of the people writing these foolish pieces about Donald Trump and a nascent dictatorship in America have a high sense of personal drama. I think they have a morality play that is unfolding in their minds in which they are the chief protagonists. But their rhetoric is not just foolhardy. I would suggest that it's also risky and dangerous. I think it's approaching the line a year out from the election, so no telling where it will be a year from now, to encourage political violence against Donald Trump as a candidate or potentially as a president-elect or president, or violent means to prevent his election, particularly in swing states. So, although I don't think they're going to take our advice, I would recommend that all of these fanatics, with their high sense of personal drama, cool the rhetoric and focus on trying to improve the Democrats' political standing by helping the American people over the next year. That's the way you win elections in America. It's not this kind of apocalyptic rhetoric that is laying the groundwork, I fear, for legitimizing political violence.
Well, I do think there's an element of incitement here that they cannot wash their hands of if political violence follows against the former president or his team. But I want to talk about their lack of faith in the Constitution. If you think that a dictatorship, period, is possible in the United States, you don't believe in the Constitution, the rule of law, and its strength. It is simply not possible for anyone to become a dictator in the United States under our current Constitution. I firmly believe that. And we have the evidence. Both Joe Biden and Donald Trump and every president before them get smacked down by the Supreme Court whenever they cross lines, and they always abide. They do not attempt to avoid.
Yeah, Hugh, and I would also point out that many of these hysterics are coming from professional foreign policy establishment types who have always viewed foreign policy and defense policy as kind of the proprietary elites in Washington, and that even presidents are mere interlopers who are trespassing on their terrain. And presidents, as far back at least as Harry Truman, have complained about this and put the record straight. You know, as Truman wrote in his memoirs, that these bureaucrats or their friends at Atlantic or the Brookings Institution have no power to make American policy. That rests in the hands of 536 elected officials, the president and the Congress of the United States. The Trump presidency, they're also trying to do in this election as well, which is rule out of bounds very basic things like the president-elect saying he's going to insist that the bureaucracy implement his and the Congress's foreign policy agenda, and if not, he's going to fire them.
Amen. And that's what they're worried about. They're actually worried about the disintermediation of what little influence they have left. And I am afraid unemployment. Senator Tom Cotton, always a pleasure to talk to you despite your Brown phobia. I think I have a Bivens case against you for your text about the Browns